Hi there, gallery members and new viewers alike. Thanks for tuning in for this latest edition of Gridiron Gallery. If you haven't seen my channel before up until this point with new videos, recommend you like this one and subscribe for more. We got plenty of content on all your favorite football leagues. And for those gallery members out there, thank you as always for tuning in. Really can't appreciate you enough. Now, on to the show. Join me today on the Gridiron Gallery podcast. I have two great guests and one that has released what I would say has been kind of it has been a buzzworthy documentary, at least in the alt football community. Both me and Josh Davis, who joins us first off from XFL News Hub in here, have watched it, have really been praising it. Josh had a great conversation beforehand with our guests too on XFL News Hub. We are joined by the director of Alliances Broken, the documentary focusing on the collapse of the AAF. It is Steve Potter. Steve, thank you very much for taking the time to join here. As we're talking, first off, this is the release week of the documentary. You're on Amazon Prime. You're going to be on Apple stores as well. And, you know, many of us have already gotten to watch it. I watched it freshly before we joined this talk. Still kind of having to process a few things, but, you know, overall, fantastic stuff. You know, it was a wonderful piece, I would say.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. But yeah, man, it's been crazy. It's only been a couple days out, and it's you know, kind of generating a decent amount of buzz, which is, you know, everything we hope for. So it's super exciting.
Yes, it's been great. And I want to get into this thing here. You know, there's a lot I can start off with, obviously many angles you can go with. For those that haven't watched yet, the documentary covers and encompasses basically beginning to ending and downfall, and even kind of leaves you with a little bit of the aftermath of what is still to come, because there's still civil lawsuits out there and millions of dollars of debt that has not been addressed yet, or even really has been tried to be touched. And I guess we can kind of lead off here with just, you know, I was fascinated before we talked here on just how this started, because at least reading on Josh's conversation with you two, this kind of was just a snowball effect of interviews leading into what became kind of a, let's tell our story so that we can kind of get after those that might have screwed us over.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was living in Orlando at the time, and, you know, I've always wanted to get into documentary journalism type, you know, and the AAF was in town, and they were really persistent about, you know, come out and support us and take pictures and bring your cameras and, you know, get on social media, talk about us, which was cool. So, I mean, you know, I knew Rennell Hall pretty well, who played for UCF. So, you know, I knew he was going to be a pretty big guy on the team. So I kind of hung around there, was taking some pictures for his Instagram and social media and whatnot. And, you know, they did so many public events, open practices to the public, all that type of stuff. And, you know, it was like they were letting anybody, you know, with the NFL, it's so hard to get media in there because it's so limited. But with these guys, they were like, you have a camera, come on in, you know, and which is kind of cool. So that's kind of how I got involved in meeting a lot more of the players in front office and whatnot. So yeah, so really just kind of hanging around Orlando, and when I was living down there, and yeah, started doing some social media stuff, and then it ended up, as the league was starting to have problems, they were like, man, it'd be crazy if you did a documentary about this. And I was like, that's actually kind of a cool idea. And it kind of just, I shifted gears and filming content type for that, and now we're here almost 3 years later.
Crazy.
And so one of the things that I wanted to know, we talked briefly, like Zach said, and obviously, you know, we've talked before. You said that once it got kind of spread across the league, that guys were just like, hey, I want to be part of this. Was there any type of, I guess, kickback from anybody? Like, you know, say somebody from a team was like, hey, I want to be part of this, and then, you know, somebody trying to stop, or because, you know, not everybody wants that story out, but at the same time, it needed to be out.
Yeah, there was definitely some kickback. For sure. You know, without getting too into detail, but, you know, there's some people that just didn't want to be in it, you know, which I understand. They kind of wanted to move on with their lives and, you know, do their own thing, which I totally get. But there was enough people that I think were like, hey, you know, this happened. We're tired of getting recruited to these pro football leagues and just being left out to dry. So I think there's enough people that were kind of like, enough's enough. I think this was kind of the final nail in the coffin of, before players are really going to start taking a stance, and as they should, to make sure they're protected and whatnot, and not just constantly used as mice to try to build a football league, honestly. So
right. And we've seen efforts like the United Football Players Association start to take fold, especially the Alliance was really a driving force in that creation as well. I mean, the XFL in a lesser degree, but really the AAF kind of spurred this. Something that kind of I become recollective with watching this documentary is back at the time, we had so much flack for Tom Dundon, and I really was fascinated because I know Charlie Ebersol wasn't left scot-free out of this in some of the public eye, but it felt like a lot of this was kind of a PR spin of, well, the big guy with the money left us out to dry, and the dude that lost control because of the deal to save the league, he did all he could. But you look at this documentary here and you watch, no, Charlie kind of comes off as a con artist, or if you've watched The Music Man, the earlier portions, the first few acts where I make a band and then I'm just leaving because I got the cash.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people, again, originally I was even on that side, like, wow, this guy came in, he promised all this money and he just left. Like, Charlie got scammed too, but like once we really started to interview the right people and who really knew the story, and obviously as they portrayed in the documentary, I think Tom was just another one that got, sold the bill of goods, unfortunately, and everybody's like, well, he's a millionaire. And I'm like, well, yeah, he's a millionaire. And he's, I think a billionaire actually, and he's got so much money, but he worked hard to get there. And it's like someone else is telling him all this stuff and he's trying to buy in to help, but it's like, he's only going to lose so much money before it just doesn't make sense, and that's not fair to him to, in my opinion. And, yeah, I mean, I just think he's another one that was just sold the bill of goods, and this is going to be great. And we have all these grandiose things, and none of it was true.
Yeah, see, I was guilty of that as well. Dundon coming in, and what we were told in the public was that he was bringing all this money. Obviously, what we were told and what exactly happened are two completely different things. And then he left, and I was like, man, he could have done this and he could have done that. And, just like you said, no, he was sold that, as well. When it comes to the guys that you did have on there, was there anything that I guess when it comes to the players that did reach out, like we were talking about a minute ago, did you have to turn anybody away? I mean, like there were a lot of guys, and that's something that's that I didn't really know about this, obviously, going into it, because I had only seen the trailer. But like, you wonder about these type of things. Is this a thing like we saw a brunt of in the 90s with a bunch of unauthorized documentaries where it's just a guy showing a bunch of videos of this other thing and just telling a story, or like you had guys that were there, and everybody, that put into it, they were there, they were in it, and that's the thing that, that's so amazing about this, is that, you don't have that feel where, you might be making, somebody might be making something up. No, they were there. Did you have to turn anybody away?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, once we did our initial set of filming, we did like 40 interviews. Okay, actually, step back. We did like 30 interviews, and we got some more people in the Atlanta, Memphis, that team area that wanted to talk. So it's like, all right, well, damn, we just did 30 interviews. We know we have enough, but we need some diversity in the sense of other teams. So let's do a road trip and start traveling up north. And we already filmed in New York and Philadelphia and places like that, and Orlando and Miami and Tampa. Basically every city in Orlando, or every city in the state of Florida. So it's kind of like, all right, let's do one more trip. And we went up there, and we had, A, budgetary restraints, and B, timing restraints because of budget. So we only had like 3 days up there, and we did about like 11 interviews in 3 days, and all spanning from the smallest one being like an hour and a half, the longest being like 4.5, 5 hours. And there was people that we just couldn't squeeze in, whether it was the studio that we filmed at was closing because like they have to go home too. Or we just didn't have enough time to do it. So yeah, there was some people, staff members and football players that we just couldn't get to. And, it really sucks because I wish we could have told everybody's story, but it was already an hour and 50-minute film. Like that's pushing it. This thing totally could have been a full on 6-7 hour movie with like my first rough cut for this was 12 and a half hours.
I would watch that.
No B-roll.
All of it.
That is just
all of it.
Interview to interview and like everybody's experience about 12 hours.
I could imagine that if you had done this way too and done it like almost like a kind of like a The Last Dance type of series, except just split it up into pieces. I'm with Josh. I would have sat there and watched throughout, like waited a week or two to get the next slice.
The only thing is we thought about that, but it's just it didn't last long enough to stretch that over, a period of time. Like The Last Dance covered, how many years of, of a thing, but this only lasted a couple months. So it's like, although there was a lot of response for it, but like almost everybody's, and this is a good thing and a bad thing, everybody's answer sounded the same. And it's a good thing because that means it was so accurate and true, but it's also like you could only hear the same thing so often, or for so long. But like I said, in a way that's good because it means everybody we interviewed was 100%, everybody we talked to in Atlanta had the same story as Orlando, and Orlando is Memphis, and, so on and so forth. Cause it just means we're all treated the same way, unfortunately. But
can I just say, by the way, you said 11 interviews in 3 days.
Yeah.
That to me, and to do it professionally, wow, is all I got to tell you. My background, I went to Ball State University and just trying to do my own with just some of the university equipment. I was lucky if I felt good at the end getting one out. So 11 in 3 days to me in a professional environment with high quality camera gear and having to get the prep time. I can't fathom that as myself. So, wow.
It was a lot. I had 3 really good friends, Grant, Cole, and Taylor, who helped make this thing happen, and, they were somehow kept sane during this whole process. So yeah, it was pretty intense, but it was like the coolest thing ever. Like I wouldn't change it at all.
Right. I'm glad you wouldn't, because I don't want you to. But no, like, okay, somebody gave you the idea, hey, let's do a documentary on this. How long into the process were you before you realized, oh man, we really have something here?
Really Chris Martin's interview. So probably 2 or 3 months in. It was, at the time, it was more or less like, hey, we're going to do a documentary telling the story of the league from point A to point B, day of inception to day of closing, nothing else. And then, we interviewed Chris. Chris at the time moved back to Fort Lauderdale, and we were up in Orlando, and it was kind of like it just wasn't working out timing wise. And, he had obviously a family, and it's kind of hard to set stuff up. So we finally got Chris when he ended up moving back to Orlando from Fort Lauderdale, even though he was down there because he already set up housing for himself and his family in Orlando. And he was waiting for kind of a break in the football season to move the family from Fort Lauderdale to Orlando, and bought a house, that whole type of stuff in Orlando. And it's like, oh, damn, now the league's closed. So he's kind of, he loves Orlando. Like he played at UCF. So Orlando's like his home for sure. But that was, so anyway, we got Chris and we did a 4-hour interview with him. And it was like, this is so much deeper than just football. This is like really about, like, we need to shift gears and start interviewing people about their lives. Like Olivia Liette, we actually did her interview twice because the first time it was very cookie cutter, like talk about the league, talk about how you got involved, that type of stuff. And then, again, once we started asking people about their personal experiences with it, we realized like, okay, this is way bigger than football. And, these people got screwed here. So that's kind of how we transitioned things. So really like 2 months into filming, we were like, yep, we got to start the transition. So
at many points in the film, it definitely felt like Martin could almost have been a narrator at times, just for how his story really is the central I think is a very central focus in this piece.
Yeah.
Not only highlighting the wrongdoings of the league and also what players were going through, especially when we're talking we're talking just the money promises that I thought that part was really hitting where I don't think it was Chris, but it was another gentleman saying, I think it was Chris. Actually, he said, we're just a bunch of, broke football players listening to a billionaire trying to sell us dreams. And I was going, yeah, that's pretty, to a lot of those guys, it probably is a little convincing when you have some person that knows how to make cash trying to sling around bonuses and these tokens, which I still laugh at the fact that they use tokens to do bonuses, but how is it from your end, because his story too is probably besides Dylan, the Smith families, the Smiths and the Martins have the two most emotional gut punches in that documentary. The Martin families alone, I had to hit pause a second while watching that just to kind of take it aback. How is it for you hearing these people go and revisit just maybe some awful times, or at least stuff they don't want to bring back up sometimes,
Yeah, I mean, getting choked up now. It was
sorry,
hard.
I just that one,
Yeah, no, it's very hard, and listening to the biggest thing is it's so much more to football than them. This is like, the biggest thing that got me through this whole process was they bought into this league to provide for their families. They left whatever they were doing beforehand to come provide for their families. And the fact that somebody could just do this and there's no repercussions or no apology or a tweet, hey guys, I'm sorry, nothing. And it's like, you see what this guy went through, losing a child and then still being baited into this league. Come play for us, we'll take care of you and your family. And just like the disrespect and disregard that, again, Chris was the center point, but it makes you wonder how many other players are out there that have had these traumatic life issues and these problems, and they're being told, hey, we'll take care of you and your family. Come play for us. Buy into our program. We'll take care of you guys. And they just get left on their ass. And there's no apology, no text, a Zoom call with the guy. I mean, nothing. Just the last tweet the AAF made was a sailboat sailing in the ocean. That was it. That's all I said. And it's like, I just don't know how you do that to somebody. It's crazy.
Well, I can tell you, obviously on a smaller scale, because it's not the AAF. It's not, something that not necessarily competing with the NFL, but this is something Zach's been following it as well. Something I've been following since December, and it just keeps getting worse and keeps getting worse. But this, this happens unfortunately all the time. I have heard personally stories because of this this one particular person, and I'm not going to bring it up unless Zach wants to bring it up and go into detail. But the NGL, you're nodding your head, so I'm assuming you're okay with it.
I'm okay with it. As much as it pains me to talk about it,
Is that the league that was charging people to try out and he's pocketing money?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
was talking to Kenneth Farrow the other day, and he was telling me all about it. And I'm like, again, it's like, you're right. That's not as large because the AAF, it was large scale, but it's the same concept. It's you're taking from people to try to better your own life, and they're giving to you, and you still treat them like crap. And it's just, I don't get it.
Well, see, it goes even deeper than just the tryouts. Like, that's what's happening right now. They're sending out emails again under the guise of being the UFL, the United Football League, trying to rebrand themselves. But I know just a few months ago, I'm talking about, this is April, guys were brought into Fort Wayne, Indiana, to try to do a bubble season is what they called it. I know guys who broke their leases to go and do this. I know guys who gave up college eligibility to go and follow this guy. It's same situation, much smaller scale, but same situation. It's like it happens all the time. And so when, San Antonio still had the same situation there. Fortunately, maybe not for some of the victims there, but the man who was behind it sitting in jail right now on his way to prison. So fortunately, there is some precedent for that there. But guys are able to continue to do this because, again, like I said, the dude is rebranded the league and is trying to do this again. He's charging, and unfortunately, there are people, fresh faces, coming right out of college that don't know. And I know this for a fact because I had a comment on my newest article. The mother of a player said, "Are you serious? We are following the NGL. Like, we were hoping that this was going to be a way for my son to follow his dreams. Is this real? Like, are you serious? This is a scam?" And I'm like, "Yes, ma'am, it is," and I was able to reach out. So thankfully, due to, people like you, other people in the alternative leagues, I'm not going to pat myself on the back because I followed in somebody else's footsteps. But I'm standing on somebody else's shoulders, but like, because because of people like that, we are able to get this out there now, and people can, that kid's not going to be a victim, and it's things like this. And did you ever really think, that maybe getting the word out there, even though this is kind of stopped, in this one particular window, there's not really going to be another AAF. Chances are, anybody that was involved in upper management, except for maybe Polian, is not going to be trusted to do another league again. But did you ever think that maybe what I'm doing, it might help the next man be able to put out the message so that somebody else doesn't become a victim?
That was the biggest reason I did it. Because like I said, originally it was just, I just want to make a documentary about the league. But like I said, once I heard how difficult it was for these guys like Dylan and Olivia and Chris and everybody that was in the film, it's like the biggest reason I wanted to do it was like, just if someone's going to launch another league, just watch this or watch anything or read an article about what you've done to these people. And it's like, and again, it's in the sense of it's yeah, they didn't get the money that they were promised. It's like, yeah, but you're messing with their credit, their living situation, their savings. Like, it's more than just like, oh, they didn't get paid. It's like, you could really be hurting them seriously in the long run. And it's like, that's the biggest reason why. Like, I hope the next person that does the league truly watches this and takes everybody's stories into consideration and be like, I just don't want to be that guy. And if that's the case, then, I feel like my job is complete then.
Yeah, right. I think that this highlights it really well. And really, the AAF's collapse really, with that, the XFL starting up, the interest in alternative football is at a new zenith, more so than I think ever before. We've kind of seen the valley when the USFL went down, the World League of Football kind of morphed into the NFL's minor league. And now it's back to a point where it's like, okay, well, football's still as popular as ever. Let's start getting leagues back together. And, some people, as I talk about in the arena scene, some people bring up, they're like, well, you're a rich guy. You throw some money around. It's fun to own a team. And then all of a sudden that fun starts going away when you see your expenses just start to swirl down the drain all of a sudden. In this case, maybe a little different. Moore seems just like a guy that wanted something so bad and then, didn't know what to do when he got it out of control. Firefest of football, as it was referenced, of course, in Connor Orr's article. But, that's a thing to take home is, like you're saying, like Josh saying, like I'm saying here, is know what you're getting the hell into. Stop throwing money at something. We just talked about, for example, this year, not even in the NGL, like the Louisville Extreme, another example of a team, I asked the question, why are you throwing money? That's a IFL team for those that don't know on this show. And they had no business starting a team, and yet they still did. And it just kind of went down in flames in a matter of a week. Know what you're getting into. That's that simple. The AAF documentary that you made, Here Alliance is Broken, touches on that so much to where you just are like, I think the public's more alert than ever on a spring league starting and really kind of not only just glancing at it, but saying what's really going on here.
Yeah.
For example, like yourself, so you've seen the Alliance. Some of the ventures that are out there. The USFL starting up here. We're waiting on the XFL, to Freedom Football, which, funny enough, you interviewed Bob Vinich there,
yeah,
which I thought was a great choice since he, has a loss or had a lawsuit at one point towards Charlie Ebersol for the founding of it. How do you see these alt leagues right now, just after making this documentary in its own right?
It's funny. I talked to Bob today, actually, on the phone for a little while, and it's back to, I think the right person has to do it, and his goal originally was to test the AAF and test it. Let's test it for a couple of years. Let's sit back and wait, see what happens, and see if it is truly a market for it, if we're in the right cities, if we have the right talent, the right talent to play in it. And I really believe in what Bob says about when he's starting his, the Freedom Football League, and I think he just has the right intentions.
Okay.
That it, and again, I think that going forward for any league, I think any league needs to have the right intentions to do this, because it's someone said, I was on a show last night and someone said, leave the cookie. If the cookie's not done, don't take it out of the oven. And it's like, that was the coolest reference like I've heard, because it's so true. It's like, don't, in my opinion, the AAF launched just to beat the XFL, to get that one up step, because, the XFL and AAF never collabed and they wanted to, but I think they really just launched it just to get it out there. I mean, they were doing press events with no team logo. They weren't in a venue. There was no guaranteed venue. There was no quarterback. You had no marketing materials to push besides, hey, we're a new football team, but hey, sign up to buy our season tickets. Well, where are you playing? We're not too sure yet, but we're getting there. It's like, so I'm just going to give you a $3,000 deposit for a stadium that it might be at a high school. Like that was the stuff that I just think was so rushed. And I think for anybody who's going to start a new football league, just don't do that.
That's exactly what the NGL
I know.
I mean, honestly, I think that me and you, Steve, we've kind of touched on it a little bit. They were selling tickets to a venue that had no idea that they were playing. They had no idea that was playing there. To get back to the AAF and why we're sitting here, I think it was Mike Waddle that said it. Like, sure, a lot of these guys, big guys, the venues and the big brands, starter, all that stuff. Yeah, they lost money. CBS, maybe. I think they were pretty protective of themselves going into it. But that little bit of money to that small vendor means a whole lot more than anything else does to the bigger guys. And that's something that's that it all, not always, but a lot of times gets lost in the wash. Have you had anybody since this? I mean, I know that it's just been a couple of days, but have you had anybody that was one of those small vendors that has reached out to you? Maybe not since this came out, but since you did this, and just to touch base.
Yeah, unfortunately, there were some small vendors that we wanted to interview and that wanted to do it, but they were literally like, they're in the bankruptcy filing and they didn't want to affect the possibility of them getting their money, which unfortunately, it's like, the chances are they'll probably never see $1. But the fact that they didn't even want to share their story to try to get that back, it's like, again, it's sad. It's like this is their time to shine in the limelight, as they deserve, because they got, again, another person that was sold a bill of goods and, hey, give us your services and we'll pay you all this money, and they're not going to get their money. And it's so sad. And it's like the fact that they felt that they had to kind of be quiet about this to just so they could try to get their money. It really makes you believe how much that money really meant to them. There was printing companies that I just know, from the Orlando area, printing companies that were used for the stadium billboards and the stadium advertisements and the handouts they were doing in downtown bars. They didn't see $1. It was all, and, we interviewed Chris Brown from, he was our stadium operations manager in Orlando. And, unfortunately, there was so much footage, like not a ton of his stuff got used. But, he talked about, he knows for a fact that there are every vendor was left unpaid. It was almost on like a, hey, we'll pay you back when we start to make some money. And it's like, buy into our league, you could be a long-term partner. And it's like, and just how many people were told that, and I knew I was watching a news clipping from Birmingham, and it was a sandwich shop, a small mom and pop catering company catered every game, and they were in debt like $81,000 because of the amount of food they catered for these players. They're never going to see a penny. And it's like, if they shut their doors, like 81 grand to like a CBS or a, company like that, it's, pennies to them. But for a company like that could be their yearly income. They could have really canceled so many weddings and parties and birthday parties, graduation parties to cater to the AAF, and they're never going to see a penny for that. That's terrible.
Yeah, it's really a shame. I kind of have been wondering a little bit on the side as we've the now years is kind of, it sounds funny saying that, but it's been 2 years now. So, you can kind of say that in the phrasing, looking at this especially looking at the documentary retrospective and kind of reminiscing a little bit on it. It feels like this bankruptcy process has kind of been drawn out a little more. I know, Josh, I know you've really been kind of upfront and covering with the XFL zone in terms of kind of spinning it so that, new Garcia, The Rock, and Redbird, they can get through this and move on. Um, I don't know if anyone knows this answer in this conversation here, but is there anything that maybe someone's let on as to why it seems the AAF has had theirs so drawn out at this point?
I just know from just general research that bankruptcy proceedings can take forever. I mean, that's just from any league. I feel like that there's so many people that's owed money, and there is no money to pay them. So it's kind of like, I feel like it'll go on until everybody gets a dollar, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it just takes forever with any court proceeding like that. It'll get drawn out for a while for sure.
Fair.
Without divulging anything that might hurt anybody's case, I do know a little bit about it. It's because, okay, I'll put it to you a little bit this way. You know how that there was, with the XFL thing, a certain bar date where players had to file their claim.
Right.
Well, the courts allowed them to continue to do that into January in the XFL. It's the same type of situation with the AAF. Not a lot of people know about it. Not a lot of people know that it's still going on. And it is a slow going process. So the court is still allowing some people who are just now finding out, because I can tell you this, there are some players that have no idea that they can file a claim in the AAF. So that's part of the process. And that's part of the reason why it's still going on, is because the court is like, because if you can prove that you were not told that there was a bar date and you have a legitimate claim, as long as the case is still open, you can file a claim. So that's one of the reasons why it's still going on.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I one of the things that's explanatory, I get, with the XFL's branding, you kind of want to accelerate it. It's just that, I was still surprised at the end when it says nothing is or that the debts and the bankruptcy hasn't really moved forward. So I know it's a slow process. I just would, at this point, 2 years in, I still would think something had to have been touched at this point in time, but maybe it just follows along the pattern of what we're seeing, like skidding away, trying to just sweep this under the rug as much as we can. It just feels that way. Which, speaking of sweep on the rug, that makes me think too, you guys touched, and many others in this interview touched on this too. It seems like almost all the figureheads too, same thing. Hines Ward, Troy Polamalu, I even forgot a few of the players that were involved in this as well, or even the coaches, mind you. I forgot that Jeff Fisher, for crying out loud, was in this. It's gone that dark. It's amazing how a lot of those are better NDAs, but a lot of those got swept under too in this process.
And honestly, back to what I said about Tom, I think they were just they were a bigger face who sold a bill of goods. But I just it was, when you watch the videos of Charlie on Sports Business Journal, when they were first launching, like way back, almost, I guess, 3 years ago now,
yeah.
He was telling them the same stuff he told the leagues or the teams once they launched. We're going to have this gambling app. We're going to be on these networks because of my connections, because of my people. And everybody believed it. I mean, like I said, I think he totally fooled Troy, Hines, Jared, Justin, Bill Polian, like Steve Spurrier. I mean, Steve Spurrier, we interviewed him, and I mean, he had no idea, and it's like, and his name is so powerful in the world of sports. He wouldn't get involved in something hokey like this if he didn't know what it was going to be. I mean, the guy is literally football royalty. He's not just going to jump into any moving ship just because. And, again, when you get people like that, you really have to be telling them something, like literally saying, hey, over that bridge, I got a treasure chest I could let you tap into. I mean, there's no other way of putting it, like, I don't know how you get these guys involved if you're not telling them, that type of stuff. But,
yeah, it's like the old country song, I got some oceanfront property over in Arizona.
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
But hey, you know, it's I guess obviously hindsight's 2020, but you know, I questioned I questioned Michael Vick for leaving the Legends. You know, I questioned him for leaving. Like, why? Like, this is an opportunity to, you know, to give back into football, you know, and you're just going to walk away. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
I tried to reach out to Michael. I messaged him on Instagram. I couldn't get a hold of him. I mean, obviously he's very out of reach, you know, for sure. But, you know, it makes you wonder, like, did he just realize it was all BS from, I mean, he dropped out the day before the first game. And it's like right then and there, I mean, that kind of makes you wonder, like, is it, you know, was the writing on the wall that early that we just couldn't see it yet?
Right. Well, I've looked, one of the pieces in the doc, like early footage, the beginnings, was actually Charlie discussing, we want to reach out. We want to talk to you about team names, let the fans be involved, which first off, looking back at this, I go, man, this was like kind of a bogus fan controlled football concept that they just pawned off people, you know, because I mean, Josh is shaking his head here because I'm like, that's exactly what I'm getting this vibe from. It's like, all the FCF stuff, except they promised none of the FCF stuff with it in the end.
I got the same exact vibe when they were talking. I was like, that sounds like exactly what the FCF was doing, like actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's one of the biggest things is, like, back to the whole preparation of this league. Like, it wasn't because he wanted to get the fans involved. They just had nothing prepared. So it's like you can't just, you know, again, like you said with the FCF stuff, or fan control football, FCF, they promise certain options for fans to have but this didn't do that. So yes, it's just, in my opinion, strictly because nothing was prepared. You were just like hoping you were throwing shit at the wall and hoping it stuck. Honestly, I mean, there's no other way to put it.
Yeah. Well, and to add to that point, my final point with that is, you know, you look at they put up coaches' names and those are involved. The Atlanta Legends had Brad Childress and Michael Vick. And I'm thinking back, I'm like, oh my God, that's right. Childress was involved at this point. He just left really early into this under, you know, conflict, or really had different ways of viewing it, is how they put it at the time. It's like a very reminiscent piece for just some of the aspects, like remembering some of the news articles and things, you know, the whole glitch, you know, going on Rich Eisen's show and trying to spew off, oh no, and you know, the part learning Tom Dunnan's like, I didn't promise that much. And he's watching him go on the Rich Eisen show and just kind of say, oh yeah, we have $250 million ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I mean, that was the whole thing behind this league. It was like, you know, Mike Waddell talked about it. It's like, you know, I forget Ethel, and so it was I forget who he referenced, but it was, you know, an old TV show, and it was just, you know, you have dad saying one thing, mom saying another, and then but nobody talks to each other. So it's like, you know, you can't run a football league when your financial backer is telling you one thing, but you're going out and telling the world something completely different. Like, no, we'll be fine. You don't have to start looking for another job. We got $250 million. It's like, well, that's not what he told you. Like, you know, I don't know. I don't understand how nothing was vetted or, you know, checked into. It's just like, if I told you guys, hey, I'm going to give you $10 million a week to run your podcast, like, are you going to look into me and see how do I have that much money, or where is it coming from? Like,
where do I sign?
Yeah, right. Like,
it's exactly what you were talking about. He wanted to get it out there before McMahon, and that was the entire thing. That's to me, that's what it was. You know, it's like, well, I'll do this little surface vetting, and you know, oh, okay, so you know, oh, your paperwork looks good. All right, fine. You know, I got to get this out, even if, you know, and I mean, you talk about you know, having the good intentions. It's quite possible, you know, that he had pure heart going into this, you know, and so, but when everything started going and it started avalanche, you know, snowballing, and it's like, because you tell one lie, you tell one little white lie, one little fib, you got to cover it up with another one, you know, and then you don't even know, at the end of it, you don't even know what's true and what's not. And, you know, you talked about things like that, and guys having the, you know, a pure heart going into this, good intentions. That's one of the things that you know, and I know Zach agrees with me, and I'm a little cautiously optimistic when it comes to something like this. But there is another league out there that's trying to push forward. And it's something that I like about the way that this league is being ran at this point. It's the MLFB. They're not doing anything. That sounds bad, but like they're stacking everything. They're getting everything in order. They're talking to cities. They're talking to venues. They've actually made a couple of hires, some major hires, and announced those. They're getting their funding in order. But what they're not doing is they're not going out there promising the fans all this stuff. They're not going out there putting people in front of cameras and spouting off at the mouth. They're not promising players anything. They're not going out here and doing this and then be left in the end if it doesn't happen. That's one of the things that the CEO, who's a friend of mine, has said. I'm not doing anything until I got everything going, and then we're ready to go.
And that's what a lot of the players I noticed, and actually staff too. I mean, they Marvin Bracey, I used his quote in the film. He said, if you're going to tell us something, tell us, hey, we don't have it done yet, but in 3 years, we could have this gambling app. We could have this salary. We could have you guys living here, but trust us now, and we're going to try to get there together. And every player I've talked to said, if it was just like that, we wouldn't be mad. Because it was like, you're all taking a step together. You're all investing in something, right? And anything in business or life really is a risk, right? So, and these guys know that. They know how shaky these leagues are. But I think what it really is, I think what the problem really is just the false promises, and it's like, it's a lot of just, and you see it, Fire Festival documentary touched a lot about this, is you see it in the tech world a lot. A lot of these, the lady, I can't think who made that. She made it. It was like, what was it? A medicine at her house. The third HBO did the documentary on it. But it's a lot of these tech companies, and you can see it. They can create this internet look and blow up a business overnight over it. But when it comes down to football and music festivals and anything that probably includes real life features, it's not that simple. It's really not. So I think that's, again, kind of touching on that, 30-something-year-old tech entrepreneur that thinks they can build an empire out of by using real people. You need real money to use real people.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that I think some people, at least some that start these leagues, lose in the shuffle, and it gets kind of lost in sight. And, in the end, it just kind of comes crashing down on you. And those that don't have to worry as much at the later stages of this, of course. Josh's point, I'm glad Josh brought up the MLFB, because I've been having fun trying to talk with him, and I know when I've messaged Frank, similar things, it's like, hey, I can't say anything that, I don't want to release it because I'm a public we're part of a public company. So I have to be dead certain. And I like that. I like the standard of that. I don't like anything jumping the gun. And I think that's the fine balance you're going to see with with any alternative leagues moving forward now. What is the PR aspect? How much can we really lay into it? How can we not overpromise? Because, at least with the Alliance, that's the perfect example of what happens when you try and throw hopes and dreams up in the air and you have to scramble with the limited resources you have. Just the fantasy app alone, which to this day, I think is one of the biggest jokes. Whenever you bring up the AAF, the first thing some people go to is, oh yeah, that fantasy app that we could bet on and we could track all the players super easy. And, it wasn't totally behind the game or anything, or we couldn't predict the plays in advance because of the broadcast. Always comes up. And I'll tell you one thing. I don't know if you feel this way, Steve, but one vibe I got from this documentary was some people felt that maybe if the tech hadn't really been a main focus in the announcements, or even just in trying to R&D on the fly while also R&Ding football, that maybe this could have turned out differently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's one of the biggest things, like Mike Waddell talked about a lot. He was the team president. So like he is, the team's, for those of you who don't know that, it's a single entity league. So Charlie Ebersol owns everything, and he has a board of advisors, right? And then he has 8 GMs. So those 8 GMs report directly to him and the head of business, Tom Deet. And those were the things that the head people were saying, was that if we didn't focus so much on technology and selling this app, maybe they really would have got people to buy into the football aspect of things, because the football was really good. And that's what a lot of people miss is they say, you know, when these leagues haven't worked in the past, they say, oh, it's because the football was bad, but the business was good. And Connor Orr touched on that, you know, and it's like it was average football that couldn't sell an audience or a fan base. And that's probably why it didn't work, because they weren't going to keep pumping money into average football. This, for once, was actually great football. The business was just a total circus, honestly.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of this, not necessarily like, affected by this, but, how much of this is the reason that we haven't heard a whole lot from the other spring league. We haven't heard a whole lot from the XFL.
And I hope
because,
so.
We're not ready to say anything until there's something to say. And that's what I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but there's nothing to talk about.
Right.
So, there's nothing to say. And why would they say something until there is something to say?
Because my thing is, if it does not happen with that league and it doesn't work and they close, the guy doesn't look like an asshole, because he didn't promise these things that are just not feasible. He just looks like a guy that tried to start a business and it just didn't work. And, there's so many people that have done that in life. They try to start something, it just didn't work, where it's like, again, if he's out there saying we're going to compete with the NFL and we're going to be complimentary to them and we're going to have this person involved and each player is guaranteed a salary of this much. How are you guaranteeing a salary for all these guys when you don't even know what your ticket sales look like? That doesn't make any sense. Like, that's like saying, if I own a lemonade stand, I'm going to pay you $400 an hour. Well, if I only sell 2 cups of lemonade, I'm losing money. Like, it's simple stuff. This isn't complicated. And I still can't wrap my head around it. I've been literally talking about the AAF like almost every day for the past 3 years, and I still do not understand why.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, it's unfortunate of me bringing back some of the bad memories, the aftermath. It was nice to reminisce a little bit on some of the fun times for it too with this, what could have been, honestly, I'm going to be honest, without the AAF, I don't start this show. I'm that league in particular, along with reading up on the USFL, made me buy into that spring football can work if someone just gets their head out of their ass and runs it correctly. That's just it. I thought the AAF was going to be it. And then I became an arena football guy, which funny enough, same year collapses. And then I became an XFL guy. Within a year, all goes down. Now, credit XFL. There's other stipulations behind that. We've gone, right. Me and Josh have talked extensively off air about that many times, but this league, even for how garbage the internals were, when you look back on it, it just makes people say, hey, there's a chance. We just need to have somebody that knows how to run the business side and lets the football people deal with their stuff per usual. Know your money.
Yeah.
To me, that's it. Know your money.
No, and like my thing is like kind of what you're saying. If you didn't do this, or if the AAF didn't happen, you wouldn't have started the show. It's kind of like that for me in filmmaking. Maybe I'm not doing documentaries. Like I saw the USFL documentary, Small Potatoes, and that guy, he worked for the USFL and he was just a camera guy that filmed everything. And that's kind of like when I knew this league was coming to town, that was kind of my goal. Like I've said, I didn't work for the league, but it was like, I'm going to just film everything because you never know what's going to happen. And, I kind of credit that whole idea of trying to start that process to that documentary. So, I mean, it's again, if the AF didn't happen, we probably wouldn't be talking right now.
Look, I was writing for a group that is in transition, and it wasn't even like I just started with these people. It wasn't anything that I was getting paid for. Still, if I was to be writing with them, it still wouldn't be anything I'd be getting paid for. But like we had a split camp because obviously, we knew that the XFL was coming. I wasn't in it. I didn't want anything to do with the XFL because I haven't been a wrestling guy since the early 90s. The entertainment value of the first round of the XFL was okay, but I like the big hits, but again, that was about all that there was. I wasn't a big fan. of the first iteration of the XFL. So I didn't want anything to do with that. I was like, it's the AAF. The AAF is gonna be it. Like, did you see the names that are involved with this, man? Like, it's the AAF. I'm all in it. So I was doing everything, and every time that I could write any little thing about the AAF, I did. And like Zach said, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be sitting here, because if it was just the XFL, I probably wouldn't have been paying attention. I mean, like, really, like, maybe I would have, because it was so completely different than the 2001 version.
And that was,
this piqued my interest a year early. And, if it hadn't ended the way that it did, I wouldn't have been so willing to buy into the XFL the way that it ended up being.
and it's funny you mentioned that, because, when Charlie Ebersol directed the documentary about the XFL, so everybody that I knew, their whole concept was like, well, he has all the inside info of what not to do. That's why this will work. But, in the XFL in 2001, it was so far-fetched. It was like, was it wrestling or football, or nobody even knows. But it really, it's really crazy. Like, that's why I think a lot of people believed in it, because he even said in interviews, like, I got what didn't work for my dad and his friends, and I'm going to make it work. I know the do's and don'ts. And that's kind of like, well, cool. This guy has the inside look that no one else has ever had, and it still didn't work. So, kind of just touching on your point with the XFL there, but yeah.
Steve, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a great discussion. I want to end this on one note, because you were around the team during its time, or at least Orlando. You were with the Apollos during its time when they were really the talk of the Alliance, and to some people's credit, the talk of football at one point. What's your favorite memory?
My favorite memory. That's a really awesome question.
Or one that stands out the best to you?
Yeah, I mean, probably like my favorite memory was when Spurrier called the play about the Orlando special, and it was on all over ESPN. I was like sitting right in the end zone. And it is like the coolest thing, because I mean, that play was all over social media, and you see Jalen Marshall toss it to Garrett Gilbert, and he catches it, and I'm like sitting right there in the end zone. That's probably my favorite memory, for sure, just of the whole experience. And actually, honestly, if you're gonna touch about the documentary real quick, interviewing Steve Spurrier in the University of Florida Stadium in their boardroom, that was like the coolest thing ever. Just getting to hang with him and talk football. It was cool. It was really neat.
I saw you highlight that special too, by the way. I noticed it. That brought me some good memories. And hey, wearing the jersey itself, so I'm just bringing the vibes.
Absolutely.
Josh, do you have anything before we go?
Just a couple of things. I talked briefly, like, we don't really have conversations, but I talked briefly to Heitner earlier. He said he was going to check the thing out today. So there you go. I don't know if you all are in any kind of contact or not. He might get in touch with you. He might not, but I congratulated on him. I told him he did a good job. He said, thank you. I haven't checked it out yet. Going to today. So, and I know that you talked to Kenneth Farrow. Again, he's like, man, he told me, he's like, I had completely forgotten about the coins and the money pot. He's like, man, he's like, it sucked the way it ended, but it was good to see that, because he's like, he was spot on. Like, the whole thing was spot on 100%. And it was good to see that, because it brought back those memories. But it sucked the way that it ended. But so there's, I know that you talked to him, but that's what he told me.
Yeah, no, and that was, honestly, I got a lot of messages from staff, just people saying like, wow, like, this was almost too vivid. And someone today I saw wrote on Twitter, and this is kind of why we did it. He wrote something saying about, the AAF, he's not sure if he's ready to watch this. He had family that was severely affected by the AAF, and, kind of leaving them out to dry. And he's like, he's not sure if he's able to watch this yet, but he's something he's excited for. And it's like, people like that, that's, why we did this. And I hope, this provides some sort of an outlet or some sort of an answer for somebody. So that's the goal.
Thanks again, Steve. Have any future projects you'd like to hint at, or where at least we can follow you for any of your future stuff? Where can we find you at?
Yeah, Cooper Street Pictures on Instagram and Facebook. And I got a couple things in the works we're excited for, and we're just ready for what's next, man. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, me and Josh and many others have watched this. Love what you did. Looking
you.
forward to what you have even beyond this. It's a very big thank you and much love from the football community for that, because it really, the story we've been waiting to hear told even more, and
Thank you.
can't say enough.
That means
Yeah, thank you. Like I've told you before quite a few times, Steve. Thank you for doing this and putting this out. This was absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
That means a lot, seriously.
The Gridiron Gallery podcast. New episodes every Friday on your favorite podcast platforms, YouTube, and premiering first, as always, at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, only on unhingedsn.com.